Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Mormon Atheist. For all of for all of you that have clicked the bell and are getting the notification, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Um, for all of the newcomers, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And so this is an ongoing series. This is going to be episode 13, chapter 11 of William Morgan's book, Light on Masonry, I'm sorry, Illustrations of Masonry. One thing I do want to point out to you apostates is there are no chapters in this book, okay? So when I refer to chapter 13, chapter 11, episode 13, that means the introduction of the book as well, right? So chapters or episodes 1 and 2 are the introduction of the book. And then the third episode is I call chapter 1. Okay. So that's how we get those numbers. Okay. All right. Anyways, so with that being said, for you guys to follow along with my the method behind my madness here. We ended the last video on page 60, okay? And we were talking about the letter G and how that was the first time so far that we have heard that we've heard that reference, the letter G, right? The grand architect of the universe and the fifth what was it? The fifth of the seven sciences, I think it was, which is geometry. Okay. So now let's pick up on page 60 where we left off on the last video. Now remember, on the last video, apostates, I told you that I would read a little bit, kind of back, tell you where we left off, and then tell you where we are beginning in this episode. So that's what I'm going to do, and I figured it appropriate to start with this sentence because of the lapse of time between these two videos, okay? Today is December 25th, 2025, and this will be our second video of the day. That's why this is funny to me. All right, just a little inside humor, I guess. All right. Anyways, let's go, apostates. Enough about me. Page 60, where we left off on the last video. The lapse of time, the ruthless hand of ignorance, and the devastations of war have laid waste and destroyed many valuable monuments of antiquity on which the utmost exertions of human genius have been employed. That's where we stopped on the last video. Remember, we were talking about the mounds, right? That were in early America. The Indian burial mounds that nobody knew what they were, nobody could describe them. So the stories that were created to explain them, how the New Jerusalem goes along with that story. Okay, that's in the last video. Okay, so now we're moving on. And this is where we start this video. Even the Temple of Solomon, so suspicious, so spacious, and magnificent, and constructed by so many celebrated artists, escaped not the unsparing ravages of barbarous forces. That's where we officially stopped on the last video. And now here's where we officially begin. The attentive ear, for those with ears to hear, receives the sound from the instructive tongue. And the mysteries, right? The mystery religion, the mystery cult, right? The mystery religions of Freemasonry are safely lodged in the repository of faithful breasts, right? Mormons, you know that wording, the burning in your bosom, right? Your faithful hearts, your hardened hearts, right? Tools and implements of architecture and symbolic emblems, most expressive, are selected by the fraternity to imprint on the mind wise and serious truth. Thus, through the succession of ages, are transmitted unimpaired most excellent tenets of our institution. Okay, so realize, understand, they're creating this. So he's telling you that this stuff is like building upon itself, right? Here ends the work part of the fellow craft degree. It will be observed that the candidate has received in this place the second section of the lecture on this degree. This course is not generally pursued, but it is much the most instructive method, and when it is omitted, I generally conclude that it is for want of a knowledge of the lecture. Monitorial writers, who are by no means coeval, 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 I don't know, coeval, writers who are by no means coeval with Masonry. All write and copy very much after each other, and they all inserted in their books all those clauses of the several lectures which are not considered by the wise ones as tending to develop the secrets of Masonry. Okay, do you understand that? In some instances, they change the phraseology a little. They are creating this. In others, they are literal extracts from the lectures. This, it is said, is done to facilitate the progress of learners or young Masons, when in fact it has a contrary effect. All lecture teachers, and there are many traveling, right? They're missionaries about the country with recommendations from some of their distinguished brethren. Okay, excuse me, apostates. I got a mason jar of water. When they come to any of those clauses, they will say to their pupils, I have not committed that. It is in the monitor. You can learn it at your leisure. This course of procedure subjects the learner to the necessity of making his own questions and, of course, answering monetarily what the extracts from the lectures are, literal or not. Right? So these people don't know, right? They're being sent out and they don't know the answer, so they just say, refer to X, Y, and Z, right? Go figure it out on your own. And the way they phrase it is like, you need to learn this on your own, right? You need to have an inquiring mind or something, something along these lines. You can use your own insert whatever, right? They're missionaries is my point here. And in the Mormon story, in the early days when Joseph is going out talking, preaching, right? He never recites the Book of Mormon. He always recites scripture, the Bible, right? And then when people ask him about the Book of Mormon, he doesn't know, and he just says like, and there is not a again, there is not a perfect sameness in all the monitors, right? The magazines, the pamphlets, or they could not all get copyrights. Okay. The monitors are the magazines, the pamphlets, the whatever, right? Some of them can't get copyrights. Hence the great diversity in the lectures as well as the work. Okay. This is why we have such a shady history of this stuff, right? Is because each lodge is, basically writing their own rules, right? Well, what does early Mormonism have a problem with? Right? They're all kind of, Oliver Cowdery's given his vision or revelations. David Whitmer, I believe, has a few. A couple of the other guys has a few, and Joseph has to come out and say, hey, none of these are all right because they're not from me, right? And this kind of stuff is in the Doctrine and Covenants, right? So again, we have that same correlation, right? Of there's too many hands in one cookie jar, right? Okay. Hence the great diversity in the lectures as well as the work. The following charge is, or ought to be, delivered to the candidate after he has got through the ceremonies, but here he is generally told, it is in the monitor. It's in the pamphlet, right? It's in the lecture. And you can read it at your leisure, right? Here is the Book of Mormon. You can read it at your leisure. Brother, being advanced to the second degree of Masonry, we congratulate you on your preferment. The internal and not the external qualifications of a man are what Masonry regards. As you increase in knowledge, you will improve in social intercourse. It is necessary to recapitulate the duties which, as a Mason, you are bound to discharge or enlarge on the necessity of a strict adherence to them, as your own experience must have established their value, right? So to be a good Mason, to be a good Mormon, right? Our laws and regulations are strenuously to support and be always ready to assist in seeing them duly executed. you are not to palliate or aggravate the offenses of your brethren, but in the decision of every trespass against our rules, you are to judge with candor, admonish with friendship, and reprehend with justice. Okay? The blood oaths, right? The study of the liberal arts, that value branch of the study of the liberal arts, that valuable branch of education, which tends so effectually affect. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so the print on the paper is like faded or rubbed away, or like half of the letter is missing. Okay, so that's why I'm having trouble with some of these words. Okay, the study of the liberal arts, that valuable branch of education, which tends so effectually to polish and adorn the mind, is earnestly recommended to your consideration. Okay, what was well, the first thing Brigham Young built in Utah was the theater, right? That's one thing that we know, right? Um, the education, the colleges and stuff like that are a big part of like the University of Deseret, right? Was established, okay, which later becomes the University of Utah. The University of Deseret is where you get the Deseret alphabet from, right? So, you know, it's interesting stuff. When you get into all this like history, and I get all this from these books. That Deseret alphabet I got from History of Utah, H. Bancroft, right? So you see what kind of stuff is in these books, stuff that you don't even like, you would never even think of, right? Remember, they're changing the language, right? Says it in these books too. They're altering the language. They alter them a little bit, he says. Especially the science of geometry, right? That's the fifth science in the 7 sciences. The letter G. That's one of the representations. The Grand Master is the other representation. Not God, the Grand Master, okay, which is established as the basis of our art, right? So we could go into a little bit of like, you know, you go into a pretty deep rabbit hole with this geometry stuff, right? I mean, it goes all the way back to like Pythagoras, you know, and so, you know, this stuff has lineage. Okay, you got to follow the lineage, and you know they're recreating this. Okay, which is established as the basis of our art. Geometry or masonry, originally synonymous terms. Okay, do you understand me? Geometry or masonry, originally synonymous terms, right? What is in magic? What is all over magic? Geometry. In Psalmonic magic, if you go to planetary magic, okay, in Psalmonic magic, planetary magic has those man, I can never remember what these things are called. I look them up all the time, but they're the geometry squares, right? There's a name for them. I forget what the name is though, right offhand. But anyways, it's where you can read them going across, sideways, diagonal, whatever, right? This stuff, okay, is incredibly important, okay? And that is geometry. In planetary magic, those symbols, I use the Joseph Smith Jupiter talisman as my prime example here. On the front of that is the third pentacle of Jupiter. That's what those symbols are on the front of the Jupiter talisman. On the back of it is a bunch of uh, things in a square, and at the bottom of it, it says 136. Okay. That is this word that I can never remember, right? Of what those things are called. I want to say Saturn. Those are the number system for Saturn. So it's what those symbols are that are in that square are Hebrew letters. And the Hebrew letters represent numbers. And those numbers add up to 136. Okay. And that 136 is your dead giveaway to planetary magic. Well, that entire symbol itself is a dead giveaway, right? Because that's what it legitimately, that's what it is. You know, once you see it for yourself, Google it and look it up and chat GBT it, all that stuff. You can't deny it. That is what it is, right? So this geometry stuff has real significance in the magic world, right? We're talking ceremonial magic here, right? The magic of Solomon, King Solomon, which me and you today call Solomonic magic, okay? Which is established as the basis of our art. Geometry or masonry, originally synonymous terms, being of a divine moral nature, is enriched with the most useful knowledge, right? So they're telling you the magic is where, the magic is where divinity is at. And I don't know if I can really argue with that, to be honest with you. That's once you study the magic and you learn the magic and you learn what Solomon is and who he is and King Solomon and what he represents in the testaments and treaties of Solomon, you will understand so much when it comes to just religion in general, right? Because it's all allegory, okay? And it's fascinating when you make these connections, right? Because you will very clearly see that, right? I mean, it's like you can't deny that stuff. All right. Anyways, while it proves the wonderful property of nature, it demonstrates the more important truths of morality. Your past behavior and regular deportment have merited the honor which we have now conferred. And in your new character, right? Because you become somebody new, right? This is why I say Joseph Smith is not a real person. Neither is William Morgan. They're allegories, right? Your past behavior and regular deportment have merited the honor which we have now conferred. And in your new character, it is expected that you will conform to the principles of the order by steadily preserving in the practice of the commendable virtue. How does Mormonism approach this right here? Okay. They have the laws of the family proclamation or whatever, right? They have all these rules of how you're supposed to conduct yourself as a Mormon, right? And so this is the same thing, right? It's the same exact thing. Such is the nature of your engagement as a fellow craft, and to these, page 62, and to these duties you are bound by the most sacred ties, the blood oath. I will now proceed with the lecture on this degree. It is divided into 2 sections. Okay. What's our time, congregation? All right. Those of you just joining in, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This channel will never be monetized. So the only way you can support this channel is to subscribe, like the videos, watch them all the way through, hit the bell, all that kind of fun stuff. Let's get going. And to the commenter, yes, isn't it refreshing to not have commercials? Commercials suck, man. I hate it because they always happen like right at the good spot. Every time it freaking hit, you're like all into it, and then it like sticks you in the heart. You're like, fuck, goddamn commercial. All right, let's go. So thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to now proceed to the lecture on this degree. Okay, section first on page 62. Are you a fellow craft Mason? Answer, I am. Try me. By what will you be tried? Okay, now think of the Joseph Smith trial here. Okay, the what's it called? Yeah, the Joseph Smith trial. Okay. What will you be tried? Answer, by the square. Why by the square? Answer, because it is an emblem of virtue. Think of what this trial, this Joseph Smith trial, right? For the glass looker trial. That's what I'm looking for. Think of what that story means to the Mormon world. Okay, so you as Mormons, right? Apostates. In the early days of Mormonism, when the glass looker trial narrative starts, okay, because it doesn't start until the 1870s, I believe, right? Is when the first, it might even be like the 1920s. I don't remember. Anyways, the moral of that story, okay, think of that when we talk about this, okay? So, are you a fellow craft Mason? I am. Try me. What will you be tried? Answer, by the square. Why by the square? Answer, because it is an emblem of virtue. What is the square? Answer, an angle extended to 90 degrees, or the fourth part of a circle. Okay, now think of the circles, right? And the points of the circle, all right? Were you prepared to be made a fellow craft mason? Answer. Oh, where were you prepared to be a fellow craft mason? Answer. In a room adjacent to the body of a just and lawfully constituted lodge of such, duly assembled in a room or place representing the middle chamber of King Solomon's temple. How were you prepared? Answer. By being divested. Remember what divested means. Divested means all of his stuff was taken, right? So in this, we're going to the temple, right? You have to change your clothes into temple clothes. Well, that's the same thing what he has to do. The fellow craft mason, the entered apprentice mason, they are all divested of their clothing and their belongings, and they are given clothing and belongings that represent the lodge, the church. And then once it's over, they are invested, they're given their stuff back, and then they're asked a series of questions, and off they go. So here we go. Let's get into it. Answer. By being divested of all metals, neither naked nor clothed, barefoot nor shod, SHOD, hoodwinked. Remember, hoodwinked is blindfolded, with a cable tow twice round my neck. In which situation I was conducted to the door of the lodge, where I gave two distinct knocks. What did those two distinct knocks allude to? Answer. The second degree of Masonry, it being that on which I was about to enter. Right? So now you're knocking on the door to enter into the degree. Okay? What was said to you from within? Answer. Who comes there? Who comes there? Who comes there? Your answer? Answer. A worthy brother who has been regularly initiated as an entered apprentice mason, served a proper time as such, and now wishes for further light in masonry by being passed to the degree of a fellow craft. Okay, let's stop right here and have a chat, apostate congregation. We have firmly established that the craft is the magic. Okay? So I was today, during our break in between videos here, I was I was checking out my my analytics and all this kind of stuff, right? And I was looking at the numbers and everything. And I thought to myself, right before we started doing this series, the video right before this series is the light thread. Okay? So I thought to myself, wow, that is so coincidental. The muse does stuff, right? So this series really starts with the light thread, okay? You must understand what the light is, right? Okay? So I urge you to go back and watch the light thread. The video that it's called the light thread. And it walks you through the light from the Old Testament to the New Testament to Freemasonry to Mormonism, okay? And what the light means, all right? So when we're talking about the craft, the magic, and taking into consideration in the book of Isaiah what the light, who the light is, right? The dawn of the morning, right? The morning star, which in Revelations, somebody else becomes the morning star or the light, okay? So there's a very, very distinct line between all of this stuff, right? The Bible, I keep saying it over and over again. You must read the Bible, okay? But here is the thing with the Bible, apostate congregation. You have to remove your faith out of this book when you read it to understand what's going on here, okay? It's really a cool thing, right? All right, so let's keep going. What was then said to you from within? Answer: I was asked if it was on my own free will and accord I made this request. If I was duly and truly prepared, worthy, and well qualified, and had made suitable proficience in the preceding degree, all of which being answered in the affirmative. I was asked by what further rights I expected to obtain so great a benefit. Now, understand, apostates, these are answers that you have to give in this order. Okay? So these long answers, like you have to, these are the answers that you have to give in this order. When master deacon says to senior deacon or junior deacon or whatever, right? This is the stuff they have to say. So, think of this. And they're creating this. So they're writing it down in their monitors, in their magazines, their pamphlets, right? Their literature. Okay, they're writing this stuff down and passing it around amongst other Masons, other religious institution, other speculative Masons. And it becomes a problem because so many people are writing their own lectures and definitions that it becomes a problem, right? So the same exact story is the Mormon story, right? Your answer. Answer: by the benefit of a password. What is the password? Answer: shibboleth. What further was said to you from within? Answer: I was bid to wait till the worshipful master in the east was made acquainted with my request. And his answer returned. After his answer was returned, what followed? Answer: I was caused to enter the lodge. How did you enter? Answer: on the angle of the square, presented by my naked right breast, in the name of the Lord. How were you then disposed of? Answer: I was conducted twice regularly round the lodge and halted at the junior warden in the south. where the same questions were asked and answers returned as at the door. How did the junior warden dispose of you? Answer. He ordered me to be conducted to the worshipful master in the east, where the same questions were asked and answers returned as before, who likewise demanded of me from whence I came and whither I was traveling. Your answer? From the west and traveling to the east. Why did you leave the west and travel to the east? In search of more light. You got to watch the light thread. How did the worshipful then dispose of you? Answer. He ordered me to be He ordered me to be conducted back to the west, from whence I came, and put in care of the senior warden, who taught me how to approach the east by advancing upon two upright, regular steps to the second step, my feet forming the right angle of an oblong square, my body erect at the altar before the worshipful master. Page 64. What did the worshipful master do with you? Answer. He made a fellow craft mason of me. How? Answer. In due form. What was that due form? Answer. My right knee bare, bent, my left knee forming a square, my right hand on the Holy Bible, square and compass, my left arm forming an angle supported by the square, and my hand in a vertical position, in which posture I took upon me to the solemn oath or obligation of a fellow craft mason. See page 52 for the obligations. After your oath of obligation, what was said to you? Answer. I was asked what I most desired. Your answer? Answer. More light. Watch the light thread. On being brought to light, what did you discover different from before? Okay, we're going to pass through the veil now. Okay, we're seeing the light. Okay, Mormonism unveiled. We're exposing the light. Okay. On being brought to light, what did you discover different from before? Answer. One point of the compass elevated above the square, which denoted light in this degree. But as one point was yet in obscurity, it was to remind me that I was yet one material point in the dark, respecting Masonry. Okay. At one point, everybody was, a material point in the dark, because there's no such thing as Freemasonry. They are literally recreating this thing. Okay. It's speculative Freemasonry. What did you next discover? Answer. Okay, so with that being said, congregation, think of this stuff, right? I mean, come on, collectively, think of this. So far in 1827, think of how technical this is already. I mean, the guys bending at the knee, he's making the square. You know, they already have lingo and jargon, and you know, this stuff didn't just form in a vacuum. You know, it like all of the sudden pop up, right? That's what William Morgan is telling you. That's what Solomon Southwick is telling you. That's what these other authors are telling you. This stuff comes from somewhere. This didn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? This communistic order of things, this religious communistic order, right, is nothing new. It's been here for centuries. It's just been called something else. They change the name, they alter it. Okay. And every one of these martyrs tell you that. Every one of them, every single piece of literature that is out there that has to do with some kind of a martyr in Masonry, or when you follow the lineage, you get every single one of them goes back, and every one of them has a martyr, and they're bridging the gap from the old to the new, right? That's what the martyr does. They bridge the gap. So William Morgan is bridging the gap. He's bridging the gap from anti-Masonic to anti-Mormonism, right? He's the martyr. He's bridging that gap. Okay. Joseph Smith is the same thing. He's the martyr. He's bridging the gap. Old Mormonism dies, right? They get persecuted. They're done, right? They get kicked out of Missouri. They get kicked out of Ohio. They get kicked out of Illinois. And their only recourse is to flee. So they flee. And this is legit the same story that every single one of these martyrs has through time. Go all the way back, right? Is they implement this communistic order. Nobody likes it. Everybody revolts. The people are extremely friendly. Everybody likes them. They believe these weird things. Okay? It's legitimately the same exact thing. The smoking gun here is the communistic order, the martyrship, and the symbols and signs and all of this kind of stuff, right? You can go to the Mormon temple, and in the Mormon temple, there's pentagrams all over the temples. Okay, the baptismal font is an 12 oxen with a cauldron on top of the 12 oxen. Okay? This stuff has meaning, apostate congregation. Do you understand? This is not by chance or coincidence. Okay, this stuff has been around for centuries. And you can track it through the literature. It's fascinating. Okay, Joseph Smith, I say again, did not create anything. Joseph Smith is the allegory. He is not a real person. Let me say that again. Joseph Smith is not a real person. Therefore, all of these stories that go along with him, polygamy, all this bullshit stuff, it's all distractions. Right? That way you go chase the shiny thing. And you forget about William Morgan and Solomon Southwick and David Bernard. You're too busy chasing the shiny thing. Was he a polygamist or not? And then you state your case on it, right? You build your career on it. And you legitimately read a couple of these books that are written in his day, And it'll only take a couple, maybe even one if you pick the right one. And whoops, all of a sudden, just that fast, your career's over. You're done, because they literally describe celestial marriage and spiritual wifery. It is legitimately described. It is not polygamy. Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy. And besides that, even if he fucking did, who cares? Because he's not even a real person. He's an allegory. How many videos have I done? Is Joseph Smith a real person? And I do another video, Joseph Smith, the original prophet, Fraser Magazine. I don't know. There's a couple other ones too that I did, but I legit recite the literature that question, and this is contemporary to Joseph Smith, right? Joseph Smith is alive. He is alive when these authors are writing these books. And nobody can describe him. Nobody knows what he looks like. He's a figment. He's a ghost. He's a figment. He's a made-up character. And then he has to make showings now. He has to show up, right? So here comes the imposter talk, right? And all of this stuff is in these books. This is not my opinion. This is not me making anything up. It's legit in these books. You just have to read them for yourself. So it's really very, very fascinating. Okay, congregation. We have reached the end of this video. We are on page 64. Where we are stopping on this video is we are talking about the light. He's in search of more light, right? And so he says, after your oath of obligation, what was said to you? Answer, I was asked what I most desired. Your answer? Answer, more light. On being brought to light, what did you discover different from before? Answer, 1 point of the compass. Okay, we already read all that. What did you next discover? Answer, the worshipful master approaching. All right, so wouldn't you go to know it that I lost my fucking place at the end. All right, so all right, here we go. What did you discover? Answer, the worshipful master approaching me from the east under the sign and due guard of a fellow craft mason, who has presented me with his right hand in token of brotherly love and confidence. That's where we're going to stop. Okay, so we will pick up again with, and proceeded to give me the passscript and word of a fellow craft mason. That's where we'll pick up at, okay? So I will reread the answer and we'll go over the light again. Apostate congregation, thank you for joining me on this Christmas day for episode 13, chapter 11. Episode 13 on Christmas Day, lucky 13, okay? So how many of you Templars, people out there that study this stuff, right? What does Friday the 13th mean? Right? That was the day the last Templar was burned at the stake. It was Friday the 13th. Right? Lucky 13. Okay, congregation, subscribe to the channel, like the videos, watch them all the way through. We are not monetized. Share the videos, read the books, all of this fun stuff. And apostate congregation, in the words of the late great Solomon Southwick, the ashes of Morgan will rise again. And here we are. We are here. Morgan has risen. Thank you, congregation, and we will see you on the other side.